advocacy, if you express your opinion about anything or promote some idea you think would make things work better, that's what you're there for. That's what you're there for, to give your opinions representing not just your own personal opinion, but the opinions that you believe are represented by the thousands maybe in your county that aren't there, that you are, representing. So advocacy, again, in the W&I code, as I mentioned, who's on your advisory board? Consumers, providers, and other advocates. So if somebody tells you you can't be an advocate, you tell them you already are, just being on the advisory board. Now, there's a huge range of advocacy from, lobbying and demonstrating at the Capitol and, throwing rocks at Schwarzenegger or, whatever else, all the way up to just talking to the media or sending a letter off or coming to Sacramento or submitting testimony or your opinion or meeting with local legislators. I mean, all of that is advocacy in addition, to your usual sort of role of representing your community. So, there's a lot that can possibly be done, but again, I'm totally aware that some counties are very conservative or cautious or limiting in what they allow you to do. So you need to be aware of all of that so that if you do want to try to do something more, you have to sort of strategically figure out who are my allies here, who do I need to get on my side, who do I need to raise this issue, how can I get support from other members of my advisory board or the community or other organizations to support this effort that we would like to see to do something more and different. Even outreach, even just going and hanging out at some job fair or health fair, we have a little table and a sign that says Public Authority Advisory Board, and you put a little stack of raisins in front of you to attract, the people with your kids. If you can talk to people about what is the advisory board's purpose, what is IHSS, you all know the general public has no clue about what IHSS is, much less an advisory board. Unless you use it or you work in the system, most of us don't know at all about IHSS. So the more you can do to publicize IHSS and help people appreciate the value and the importance, the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness and all, like that builds community support. It also is a mechanism for recruiting people onto your board. So outreach can be a very effective advocacy activity just by publicizing yourself and letting people know what you represent, what values you represent, what your concerns are. So moving on, I don't know how much more time I have, but I know you got all day. So I assume all counties establish political positions through some mechanism in their county. That is, their board of supervisors or a committee associated with their board of supervisors probably periodically gets together and says, what do we think about SB 426 and AB 922 and blah, 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 public policy. And they then usually vote on what policy, what issues they oppose or support. Then they tell their lobbyists to go after, stop those things we don't want and push those things we do want. And that's an important thing for you to know how it works in your county, because since you're not the official governing body with the legal authority to decide what the public authority stands for, one way to be able to take positions is find out what your board of soups positions are, your county's positions are on these issues, and maybe if you agree with them, then you can feel comfortable advocating for those. When I first started in Alameda County and somebody did something bad at the state and I wanted to go after them, or we wanted to go after them, I was told I had to go to this committee of the Board of Soups. So I went there and they said, what are you here for? I said, well, we don't like AB, whatever happening. And they said, we don't either. So why are you here? I said, because we need permission from you to take the position on behalf of the public authority to oppose that. And they said, well, we have these positions that are like permanent, long-standing, forever positions. We voted on them years ago, and guess what? One of them is Alameda County opposes reductions in state funding of county programs. Bingo. They said you don't need to come here to get permission each time you want to oppose something the state's doing that reduces services. That's our position, you just go ahead. So we've kind of relied on that, because almost everything we oppose sort of relates in some way to that. Also, even if you're just wanting to represent yourselves as an advisory board, sometimes you can do that. Because maybe you can't say the public authority, because that's the Board of Soups, supports or opposes blah blah, but you might be able to say our advisory board supports or opposes. If you can't even do that, then as individuals you can support or oppose stuff. You can go to Sacramento, you can write, you can submit testimony, you can talk to media and make clear that you're an individual and you oppose or support stuff, and you're okay. There are some considerations. The law does forbid public agencies, and public authorities are public agencies, from expending public funds to support or oppose ballot measures and candidates. So if something gets onto the ballot, Proposition 426, whatever you like to vote on every day, or candidates are, up for competing to be elected, you're not allowed to spend public funds to support or oppose them. But if your issue is legislation, proposed laws, stupid plans by the county or the state or whoever else, those are fair game. You can actually use public funds to send people up to Sacramento to testify against the law that's being proposed, or to go to a hearing and complain about how they're implementing the overtime rules and stuff like that. It's legal. The other way of getting around it, by the way, is even for candidates and ballot measures, you're not allowed to use the public money to oppose or support, but you can provide information. You can educate the public. It has to be done in a sort of, Fox News, fair and balanced way. I hope everybody knows I'm kidding. So you could send out a letter or put out on something and say, here's a ballot measure. Here are the pros, here are the cons. Here are the arguments in support, here are the arguments against. Or just information. Here's how we believe this would impact people with disabilities. So as long as you're just providing facts, you're providing a fair and balanced view of that ballot measure, or even a candidate, you actually can use public funds for that. So most people don't know that. Okay. And again, if you get limited by what you can do as an advisory board or a public authority, you can still work with other organizations that can advocate more. You can work as an individual, whatever. So keep that in mind too. Moving on, the last little group of possible advisory board committee roles include attending trainings, participating in outreach activities, participating again in local and statewide activities like CICA, Homestead, ICS Coalition, participating when you get requested by the state to be on hearing panels or work groups, representing public authority at meetings and community events, participating as trainers at public authority training. Somebody asked me, what's that all about? Well, there are trainings sometimes where having an IHSS consumer at the training is useful. Like, I know when we train workers and consumers, I always think it's a good idea to have a worker and a consumer there up there saying, okay, this is what this is really like in my life, I think sometimes a consumer listens to a consumer more than they listen to me, or a new provider coming in listens to a veteran provider more than they listen to me. Anyway, so those are just things that I think can be important. Some places we don't really do much in Alameda, but we did in San Francisco, and I think they still do. And that is, some of the people on their advisory board serve as mentors. Like they will be assigned to new people in IHS and agree to sort of show them the ropes or talk to them about what happens. So the last little bit, I'm on page 4 now of my 8-page thing, so I'm going to move even faster. The section C is on working with your public authority and the supports that help make you an effective advisory committee. And again, I'm highlighting that these are just possibilities. It doesn't mean everybody gets to have these kinds of supports. Again, we in Alameda are extremely fortunate that our advisory board is supported by the county, both financially and in other ways. But you'll see here, the first one I still have listed, and I keep repeating this, and that is, in order to have an effective advisory board, it has to have a meaningful role. 5 minutes left. Okay, I'm really going to go fast. That's why I gave you this in writing, so you can go home and read it, on the way home. Public authority should, and the ICES program should, solicit and really respectfully listen to the feedback from their advisory board. That sometimes takes some doing, and you have to sort of earn it. If your comments are way offline or extreme or based on your own personal situation rather than what might be representative of the best interest of the group, your advisory, your public authority, maybe your county is going to be less inclined to listen to you. So it's really important to try to sort of conceptualize issues in a sort of a systems kind of way rather than my worker's timesheet is always late. The issue really is that a lot of workers' timesheets are late, and what can we do about it? Okay? So reading on, public authorities should share all information they get with their advisory board members to keep them informed. Advisory board members, if possible, should have their expenses related to their role reimbursed. Again, when your county says, sorry, $6,000 is all you get, so you can't come to Sacramento, you don't get a stipend for attending meetings, you don't get your expenses reimbursed, whatever, that's their right to decide. And that's one of the reasons we are totally dependent on the county for money. But it doesn't mean that it's not possible. As I mentioned before, this MOE thing, my county could choose to give me 14 Cadillacs and 27 new staff, wouldn't cost them a penny. So when your county says, well, we just can't afford that, increasing your budget for your advisory board or your public authority or your ICES program, they're actually just being cautious. They don't want to do it for some reason. And maybe it's a legitimate concern that a year or 2 or 3 from now, the deal with the state goes away. That means the state and the feds cover any increase in the cost of the ICES program advisory board or public authority. But it's a choice, not actual legal or financial prohibition or limit. I think public authority can sometimes help arrange for transportation. Meetings should be in a convenient location for people. And again, some of you have a hard time recruiting and getting people to meeting because you have, like 3 people per 10 square miles. And so trying to get 10 people on a board, means you're going to have to draw people from 100 miles away. In big cities and concentrated population areas, it's way easier to get people who can get to meetings. But again, if they're convenient as possible for people to get to, you're going to have a better chance of getting to it, people to it. We provide some nutritious snacks or food. Some people have said that that's prohibited by federal or state law. Our Board of Supervisors invited our advisory board members to a dinner, and I believe fed them there. So it's not totally out of the question. It may reflect the fact that in Alameda County, since the county is putting in sort of non-IHSS money into our program, maybe they don't run into this issue of being concerned that the feds or the state might deny reimbursement for snacks or food at meetings. But I remember a few years ago, the head of social service agency sent out a memo saying, whenever you have a meeting with members of the public, you're allowed to provide snacks. And so he of course recommended donuts, but we sort of took that and twisted it a little bit and said, how about something more nutritious? So we do provide some food at our board meetings. There really should be written rules of conduct for your board. Some of you may have them, some of you may not, but it's really important, I think, to have written rules that sort of say, this is how we treat each other at our meetings, this is how our meetings run. You don't have to be like totally formal parliamentarian, totally Robert's Rules of Order, although some of them, I think, are appropriate for these meetings. But there at least should be an agreement and understanding about how your meetings run and how you treat each other, particularly to try to encourage people to feel respected and welcome at meetings and contribute their ideas without feeling like someone's going to jump on them or criticize them or make them feel stupid. They need to work hard when you're on a board. If you're going to do something meaningful, you have to come prepared, read your minutes from the previous meeting, thought about stuff on the agenda, think about what you might want to contribute in the discussion, try to focus on a decision and an outcome rather than let's just sit here and talk about this. Those are things that can help make you more effective, to really come out of your meetings with decisions. Public authority and PS and board staff should work together and be respectful when they're developing the agendas and be honest with each other, keep each other informed, and appreciate what each of them is doing. I think it's helpful for advisory board members to have a better sense, thank you, of the reality. This is like the Academy Awards, and I'm thanking those last things. They should have a sense of what's realistic for advisory board, public authority staff. So sometimes advisory board members say, hey, would you do blah, 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 blah for me? And it's like, I don't really have time to, but they don't want to say that. So it's helpful to just sort of appreciate the workload of your staff and what's realistic for them to help you with. And you guys should, I hope, have regular presentations. Maybe bring IHS managers to your advisory board meetings to ask them what the hell's going on, you know, to give them feedback about stuff that comes up, to answer questions, you know, two-way communication. You should have reports to the Board of Supervisors or opportunities to speak to the Board of Supervisors, even if it's not in a form, if it's not a formal advisory board report to the Board of Supes, you can still go to the Board of Supes, and you, as a member of the public, you can say what the heck you want. And you should be receiving some kind of training. If you don't have a clue about how legislation works, you don't have a clue about what a budget looks like when they put it in front of you, what the county's budget process is, you know, you can have somebody come and try to explain that to you. You could have trainings and people come and help you become a more informed, capable board member. And there should be efforts to encourage interaction with other organizations, you know, CICA, etc. And again, I think take personal responsibility to recruit good board members. The next section is on expanding your role, but it's mostly just common sense. My basic premise here is, if you want to do something more and different, you can't just come in and announce, we're going to do all these same things that Alameda County Public Authority gets to, you know, because they're just going to like, get out of here, you know. So my opinion, if you think there's some resistance to expanding your role, if you're in a very conservative county that doesn't really want you to do anything because they're afraid you're going to complain or make them look bad or whatever, one thing to do is go back and talk to your executive director, who hopefully might be, you know, supportive of something. But even if they're not so much, you can talk to your fellow board members and ask to have it put on their agenda and say, hey, let's talk about how we can do more. Let's talk about how we can accomplish more. And hopefully you'll be able to at least have a discussion. And then you can pick something simple and safe sounding, and maybe say, hey, let's start doing this. And then you do it, and you show you're capable of it. You show you can be effective. You show you can be responsible. And then you build towards saying, hey, we show that we can take care of that new role. Let us do this and this and this now. So to me, I think that's one of the ways you have to sort of think long term. And again, you have to be strategic with working with your Board of Supervisors, your county people, and your public authority staff to sort of try to keep everybody, you know, in support of that effort. You know, it can't just be done unilaterally by your advisory board. So the last couple of pages are really just sort of a list of things you could pick to do more of, and sort of ways you might do them. Again, if you don't know what your county's process is for establishing political positions, you're probably never going to move on to be able to consider taking a political position for the advisory board, because you don't know the game, you don't know the rules, you don't know the limit, and somebody will say, no, you can't do that, and you'll believe them. So the more you know about how your county functions and what other public authorities do, the more you'll be informed and capable of sort of making your own advisory board more effective, and achieve more outcomes, and make the world a happier, better place for us all. So these are just a list of a lot of things, including outreach, and trying to get more funding under the maintenance of effort, and letting, you know, arguing with people at the county when they say, sorry, there's no money for that, and you can say, you can give me $1 million more and it doesn't cost you a penny, don't say there's no money for it, you know? But again, you might get a really, really negative reaction from people. You might get, you know, like, we don't do that, or we can't give you guys money because we can't give way more money to mental health or, you know, fixing potholes. But that money is available for advisory boards, IHS, and public authority programs. So my last little comment is, you can change your bylaws. Again, we changed our bylaws to make advocacy a responsibility and not just like maybe you get to kind of a thing. So there are things you might look at. And so my last little comment, sort of in this last paragraph or so, is just hope when you go home you'll consider what your advisory work can do to become more effective and have a more meaningful role. Communicate, work with your executive director, PA, county staff, fellow committee members. Discuss how you might find ways to expand your role, but understand and respect the limits of what's feasible in your county. And I believe an effective advisory board should be a positive, helpful force that supports the ICES program. If the ICES program is under criticism, because they're not getting whatever done in time, and you guys know why, you can communicate with the public and say, yeah, that's not a good thing, but here's their limitation. They're trying, they're changing, they're doing their best. You can defend them. We do that sometimes where somebody complains about something ICES is doing, and we know that that complaint is invalid or inappropriate or unfair, and so sometimes we can inform people about what the reality is, and it's actually supportive of the ICES program and can deflect some of that criticism. So again, you can make your advisory board better, you can make your ICES program better, you can support them, and it should be seen as a benefit, not advisory boards being some kind of threat or menace or just troublesome. So that's my speech for today, and on that note I will retire. We do have some questions, so if Charlie thinks he wants to take some questions, I'm sorry I went so long. One more thing, I put some of these newsletters out there just to cause more trouble. This is our newsletter. We do them every couple of years because they're so expensive. We send one to every ICES household, so it's expensive. But this particular edition talks a lot about advocacy and has some stories written by members of our advisory board, including Michelle Rousey, on the importance of advocacy and how to get hooked into an advisory group. So just go over there if you want one of these. You're welcome to take one. I don't know if there's one for everybody. Okay. Questions? Charlie, you're up for questions?
No, we got Gail here, right?
Can we
So,
Gail just came in, didn't she?
If you have questions of me, call me. Here's my card.
Charles, are you going to stay right here?
I will stay a little bit after too.
No, I was going to say the next, after Gail and...
I'm gonna be here through the end.
Okay,
And then let me take this one last liberty, and that is members from Alameda County's public authority and staff, before this ends, I would like us to either get together here for a few minutes or over at the Vagabond Inn lobby where we're staying for a few minutes, because I want to talk with you about dinner plans. I want to give you some handouts for Disability Capital Action Days, some talking points, and other stuff. Thank you for your attention.
thank you very, very much. We'll have a chance to ask Charles questions in the very last section of our meeting today. But I wanted to move on because our next speaker has a time frame. She's very, very busy. As you know, it's a crazy time in the Capitol this week as all the final hearings are coming down, and the budget just came out with its reform last week, so busy time. I'd like to introduce Gail Groner to everybody. She's a special assistant to the Speaker of the Assembly. And Gail's going to talk to us about, Charles mentioned going in and talking to your legislators. And a lot of us don't know what that looks like. And Gail's going to talk about the best way to approach your legislators and how to actually get their attention and make your visits, whether it's here in the Capitol or whether it's at home, effective.
All right, thank you, Janie. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Gail, and I'm happy to take questions too. I want you to know I've been working in the state capitol now since 1996. I started out working for a legislator from Los Angeles, and then I'm sorry, I apologize. I'll hold it close. Is that better?
Yes.
All righty, thank you. So I worked for a legislator from Los Angeles, Barbara Friedman, and it was her preference to take on only like four big issues every year. And that was a great first staffing experience because she really wanted to dig in and learn the detail and really understand programs. After that, I worked for the Speaker of the Assembly from Fresno, Cruz Bustamante, in '97. So any Central Valley people here by chance? Great, terrific. So I got to know Fresno County, and then I ended up working for Los Angeles County for a couple of years, but based in Sacramento. So I sort of learned the inner workings of the county, and I appreciate the comments about really understanding like how are decisions made and positions taken, because it's helpful to understand. And then I came back to the legislature in the year 2000, so I've been working in the Speaker's office in the Assembly since then. And I have to say, I'm very glad that I was there when the state had money and when the state had billion-dollar surpluses, because that was the time when the IHSS program was really being enriched. And then, you know, as we all know, the bottom fell out, and I never dreamed that we would be making the cuts that happened. So I know it was a very difficult, challenging time. And now, this year, finally, we are turning the corner from that, and we are seeing that the state is recovering, and now there are additional resources to work with. So this is really what I want to say initially is that I feel like there is the beginning of real hope now in the Capitol. And so I think one sort of just setting the tone perhaps when you're going into members' offices and meeting the legislators, meeting their staff, is that there is opportunity, there is possibility. And before this, it was very, very, very difficult because of the budget crisis. And I believe me, I hear you. There are staff in the Capitol who have worked on these issues throughout, and believe me, I hear you. I know that those were some terrible years where there was bad policy put into place and there were cuts made, and now I really want to emphasize to you that I think we're moving forward. I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to move forward because this governor remains very cautious. But I want you to know that our legislators in the Assembly, and we have share a lot of common priorities with senators in the state Senate, that there is a very strong desire to move forward on these program issues. So I think this is the climate in which you're walking into the Capitol. It's this week there's a lot of activity because the agendas are being written and the recommendations are being prepared, and Thursday the budget subcommittees will convene their hearings to take action. And so I think to be meeting with offices and to help describe what the program is and what it means to you is really good timing. But I think there are going to be some actions taken on Thursday that will start to build back. So on SSI, on that funding level, that there will be a step to take back. Hi, Randy. Hey, I see a lot of people I now recognize, including Bud Sales, I should say. I work for the speaker from San Diego, and San Diego's here. And so on Thursday, there will be, I think, some initial actions to build back SSI. And in the Assembly, the Budget Committee has already voted to restore the 7% service hours cut. And we sort of, felt it important to take that action regardless of funding source, regardless of, any debate of where that comes from, that should happen this year. And I think there is a lot of momentum to do that. Again, things are fluid. but I think there is a very serious, strong push this year for that. So when you're meeting with legislators, I would recommend that when you go in and talk to folks, if they if they are your home legislator, they're from the area that you live in and you are working on your program with them, I would learn something about them, find out if there is a way to connect with the legislator. So, for example, we have a whole bunch of new legislators in office this year. The legislature, we have term limits. The term limits just switched from being 6 years total possible in the assembly to 12 years. So if you're meeting with a new legislator, they have the potential to be here for quite some time longer than we've had in the past. So there's really an opportunity to connect and create a relationship. And believe me, the staff and the legislators, they want to hear from folks from the district. My sense is they get a little tired of meeting with the private lobbyists, who have a contract to work on a particular issue. They really want to hear from folks from their home district. So if you happen to be in a meeting with someone from your area, take advantage of it. Find out, maybe what they did in the past there, or, were they born there, or what is their home area. So we're learning things about our new legislators. For example, our Assembly Member Tony Thurman from Alameda County, he used to work as a social worker at a regional center for several years, since he's worked with at-risk youth. So that's a point of understanding that he has that sets him apart from other legislators. We're learning about a new state senator, Stone, Jeff Stone, not the Mark Stone from the Assembly, but Jeff Stone, as I understand it, he has talked about the fact that he has a grandson in the developmentally disabled system. So it just gives him a frame of reference for why are programs needed and why are these supports and outreach important to have. And then we know that we have a long-standing familiarity with a couple of state senators. Senator Bell has a family member. Senator Pavley is very interested in IHSS. Many members are interested in IHSS, but I think some have particular personal connections. The leader of the Senate, the Pro Tem Kevin De Leon, his grandparents used SSI. We have a lot of legislators who come from communities, who know the programs, who know people utilizing programs, who have done visits. I think a great way to connect with your legislator and to create that lasting familiarity with your program is after you meet them, take the card of someone or find out a contact in their district office. So when you're talking to people in the Capitol, find out a contact person to talk to in their local office, because then you can invite them to an event, send them an email, send them your newsletter, keep them up to date on what you might have going on with your advisory committee locally. If there's some sort of